O Heavenly Father, we ask that we may begin all things by your initiative, carry them through by your grace, and bring them to completion through your Son, Jesus Christ. And we ask all of this in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. In the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Let's get started. I think we got all the main panelists here. We got a lot of new speakers too. Father Ian's been here before, Nominus has been here before, but I know Jordan, you haven't, and also Super Testnet is new. So I just want to kind of give a brief overview of what we've been doing, and we've been hosting spaces since January. Actually, this will be the 5th space, and I'm broadly calling the topic that we've been talking about Christian futurism. I like that name because I think it pretty perfectly encapsulates, exactly what it is. We're talking about Christianity and we're talking about the future. So the first space we held was kind of kicking off some discussions about a philosophy called EAC, which is kind of broadly like a techno-optimist philosophy. And, a lot of these guys were building emerging technologies. We're building, things that don't exist yet. That won't exist until we build them. And the discussions of what are these technologies, what's good, what's bad, and how should Christians in the church be approaching the tech. Oh, okay, we got Catholic crypto too. I forgot they were on the panel. Let's pull in. And Father Ian, if you don't mind, if you can just mute your mic, you're coming through a little bit. Cool. So Christian futurism, I would say 2 very simple premises. First one is that the future is going to be more technologically advanced than the present. And the second one is that the future is going to be Christian. So as Christians, we need to be thinking about the future in this way and asking ourselves, what is the technology that's going to define the landscape of the future? We know what the technology is that defines the present, and some of it's good. A lot of it has not been so great. We see a lot of censorship. We see a lot of not great things happening with the current landscape. So the question is, what's the future actually going to look like, and how can we start preparing ahead of time so we don't find ourselves in the same situation? That's really the question. And so, as Christians, we do understand the future is going to be Christian. The church is going to march forward through time, and all nations, all people, the whole earth is going to be collected into the church. And if that's true, and if it's also true that the future is going to be more technologically advanced than the present, then we have to approach these technologies with a lot of hope that they can bring a lot of good. Sure, there can be bad things, and that's probably what we're going to be talking a lot today about. But there's also good things. So, with most things, there's 2 sides to the coin. So let's think about it. And, let's also realize that Christians in the church, we really have to embrace this conversation now. And, if we don't, future Christians will, but we're going to be indicted for a failure to steward the talents and the gifts and the opportunities that we've been given. So let's not approach the conversation lightly. Okay, let's just set the stage, I guess. You guys can kind of introduce yourselves. I gave you guys a brief interview, but just tell us a little bit about why you're here in the conversation and why do you think that emerging tech has a Christian component to it. Matt, why don't you take it off?
Hey, thank you, Connor, for hosting the space. And just to clarify, Matt Pinto started the Catholic Crypto Conference and the Catholic Crypto Network. I'm Matt Baggs, not Matt Pinto. But anyway, excited to be here. So Catholic Crypto, we had the conference, and then we're trying to, get Catholics who work in Web3 connected to each other, get Catholics in general interested in Bitcoin and blockchain and things like that, and then trying to have a voice at the table. So Matt Pinto started the conference off by saying he is the founder of the Ascension Press, right? This huge. So anyway, in case you don't know who he is, huge Catholic media group. Anyway, so he started off the conference saying, hey, I wish 30 years ago, someone would have grabbed me by the lapels and said, you don't realize how big the internet is going to be. And he, looked at, blockchain and said, hey, it looks like, people are saying some similar things. Seems like it might be the next big thing. And so, yeah, I think that, it's not guaranteed that, the future will be decentralized. It's not guaranteed, that although the church will persist, it's not guaranteed that, the church will have, a strong presence at the table. And so I think we need to do everything we can to be part of the conversations and help to drive things to be built virtuously and for the good of human flourishing.
Appreciate that. Also, Matt, so he was just talking about Catholic crypto, but he's a good mind too. He's actually been working a lot in the Bitcoin space with some of the development there recently. And I don't know if you realize, Super Testnet, but he was building that chess app on BitVM when that discovery was first made. Kind of cool.
Oh, awesome. Okay, good to talk to you in a Twitter space, Matt. Yeah, I'm Super Testnet. I'm a Bitcoin software developer. I focus mostly on layer 1 scripting, some stuff on the Lightning Network. I did the first implementation of the BitVM concept, and lately I've been working on a new layer 2 project called Hedgehog. So I spend a lot of time developing new ideas and doing a lot of research and development work in the Bitcoin space. Also a Catholic, and my faith is the most important thing to me, so glad to be here and talk a little bit about it. I'm also in Prague right now, getting ready for the Bitcoin Hack Day that's starting tomorrow, and so right now it's 1 a.m. where I am, so I do have to be a little bit quiet because I'm in like a building with other people who are trying to sleep, but it's not so bad.
Awesome. I do also want to say this is kind of an ecumenical space, so obviously we've been very Catholic heavy right here at the beginning of the discussion with Father Ian and Super Testnet Catholic crypto. But I'm actually Protestant. And so when I sent the message to Jordan, I said, hey, this is a really Catholic heavy space right now. But would love to also bring you on board and kind of maybe balance the conversation a little bit, not just on the tech side, but on the Christian side. So happy that Jordan Bush is lending me a little bit of support here. How you doing, Jordan?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Jordan Bush. I was a pastor and church planner in Montevideo, Uruguay. My wife and I and our kids helped plant a small church there. And then there's a number of reasons why we left, but basically we had some denominational changes. And in addition to that, I contributed to the book Thank God for Bitcoin, wrote that alongside with Jimmy Song and a handful of others. And so then, just basically the book came out. Right around the time we were coming back to the States, and we put together a one-day conference in Miami in 2022. And on the tail end of that, I had Jimmy and some of the other guys, including Gabe. Gabe's in the audience. Just basically said, hey, you've seen the insides and outs of what it's like to work in ministry, and half of our church members in Uruguay were Venezuelan immigrants, so I got to see upfront seat to currency devaluation and what it does to churches and what it does to nonprofits and just again normal people as well. So they just basically said, hey, if you're willing to do this work while you're figuring out doctrinal things, we're willing to fund you to work on this full time. So for about the last 2 years, 2 years as of I think like a week ago, I've been working on this. And so as Connor mentioned, we'll be doing the Thank God for Bitcoin conference on the 24th and 25th of July in Nashville. I'm going to have a bunch of speakers, including your Guido Holzman, Catholic Austrian economist and the author of the book, The Ethics of Money Production, which I cannot recommend highly enough. So we'd love to have you guys join us, and you can find more information at tgfb.com. In terms of my presence here, I'm happy to back up Connor on the Protestant side of things, and also I was a little bit when you started mentioning the futurism. I didn't know if you were desiring to rehash our space debate, our previous debate on your podcast about Tesla. So Tesla and SpaceX and all those guys.
Yeah, totally. So the topic's obviously decentralized technology, but there's a lot of philosophy that goes into that, right? Not even just on the techno-optimist side, but even like about decentralization. So I mentioned at the beginning of the year, we started hosting spaces with EAC, which is effective accelerationism. It's a philosophy behind a techno-optimist movement. But there's a lot of philosophies at play. There's transhumanism. And I think probably in this conversation, probably going to also have to talk about libertarianism a little bit. And so the question is, is the future decentralized? And some people would say, oh yes, everything has to be decentralized. Some people would say, listen, not everything. Well, so the common thing is not everything has to be on the blockchain, right? But also not everything probably necessarily has to be decentralized. So where does the church's interest, where is the church's interest and Christians' interest served by seeing things decentralized? And how can we, like Matt said, how can we secure a seat at the table with whatever this future that's developing is? Father Ian, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit too and some of your work in the space?
Yeah, I'm Father Ian Van Heusen. So I do a lot of media stuff. My main area of focus is ascetical and mystical theology. But in the past 3 years, I've been working closely with Crescite and with Faith Games. We're doing everything VR, AR, we're focused video game short term because VR doesn't seem to be taking off. And then with Crescite, we're working on tokenization. And if you look at Crescite, there's too many big announcements to list off, but we're really doing some really cool stuff with Crescite, and I'd be glad to give my thoughts on that. I was just meeting with Carl today. I'm here in New York City, visiting my dad who lives in Brooklyn. My parents, I should say. My dad's here, but my mom's away for right now. So, but yeah, let's open up the conversation.
Cool. And then also Nominus, I actually didn't give you a brief bio, but if you want to tell us about your activities in the space. I don't even know if you want to talk about 21E8, but I think the whole Bitcoin monastery conversation is kind of interesting too. But Nominus has kind of been a staple since the beginning, so I always love to bring him on board. He's a great guy.
Yeah, sure. I was an affiliate of this company in the decentralized space called 21E8 for a while before they went into hibernation. But I did buy a Mac Mini from them, and I'm excited to see what they do with it. But my work is actually more focused on the AI side of things. I am super interested in Bitcoin and the decentralized space, especially the privacy aspects that it might provide, and especially the immutable information systems that it might provide us to record information going into the future. I'm really excited about really the underlying technologies. But yeah, I'm a developer and I'm working in AI on new human-machine interfaces and even human-to-human interfaces, and new AI algorithms. I do a lot of research on physics-based ML and mechanistic interpretability of AI models. And I'm really interested in investigating the theological and philosophical implications of AIs and how they sort of hold beliefs in that big, huge number matrix, and how we can, as Christians, utilize that for God's glory. I was born Catholic, and I'm still Catholic, technically. But I just had a period where, in the middle of my life, where I went Protestant for a while, but the last couple of years I've come back to Catholic. It was really a situation out of my control when I was a kid, but yeah, I love the Catholic Church and Protestant. So I actually have big ideas on the reconciliation of the two, which might be a controversial idea. But yeah, I'm super excited about decentralized tech and how it can bring glory to our Father and just tech in general. So yeah, especially AI. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome, appreciate it. And Carlos, I don't know, he has internet issues sometimes, but I did want to bring him on mostly to add the AI element. I think it's important because we see that AI, like especially with OpenAI and ChatGPT, we see a lot of closed source development happening in that world right now. And I think a lot of people recognize how like world changing some of these developments are with artificial intelligence. And so open source like AI is a huge conversation right now. Like how can we preserve that? So maybe we have some of that element to the conversation, but just broadly, it's about decentralized tech. So to get the conversation started, I threw this tweet on the Jumbotron, and I know Jordan Bush, you're probably familiar with RDN. I think both of us have had some conversations with him. And it was kind of funny talking about 21E8. I don't know if everybody knows 21E8. It was kind of a meme in the space last year. But they are a company, and there's a lot of associations there with this Bitcoin monastery idea. Some strange things. I don't think anybody really fully understands it, but I do find elements of the conversation engaging, and I think it's really prescient as we're talking about decentralized tech. So the tweet has to do with recognizing kind of a political element to this conversation, and I think that's really kind of the impetus behind a lot of decentralized tech, is to realize that, hey, we're not really in control of the technology and the systems that we have to use day by day, right? And we see a lot of censorship happening with Christians in a lot of different avenues. And anywhere that you have kind of a locus for like a weakness, a single dependency or a single point of failure, that's also a locus for control. So Bitcoin is a very obvious one, talking about money, talking about the monetary system, and we see a lot of bank censorship happening. But there's also other avenues we see, like, hey, you create an app. We don't have Albert in the space right now, but he created this Christian app, Ecclesia. It's a Christian Bible app, and he wasn't allowed to list it on the Apple Store. He finally got through some of the hurdles there, but that's a point of that's a single point of failure. That's a point where Apple is now controlling the conversation as to what kind of information gets out there. So it's not just a money conversation. There's other things that we have to ask ourselves. What are the solutions to these problems? And is decentralization the best solution? So in Odien's tweet, he's bringing up Christian computational, financial, and energy sovereignty. I'll say I do a lot of stuff with crypto. I do a lot of stuff with Ethereum. I know a lot of Bitcoin maxis here don't love those technologies, but I will say that I hate crypto casinos. I hate the meme coin stuff. Like, I'm not about it. What I want to see is ultimately decentralized money, decentralized storage, possibly. I think decentralized identity is a huge conversation. I wrote a piece on this character Brantley with Ethereum naming service. I think everybody should understand what happened there and why that's important. You can actually find that on my Medium, which is in my bio. Decentralized identity and so yeah, decentralized compute, decentralized storage, decentralized identity, decentralized money are probably the main ones. So why don't we just maybe go around the panel, start the discussion off with this question, which is, what really needs to be the focus of decentralization, and does everything need to be decentralized? Like, what are the limits with that question? And that's kind of a big one, but what really should be the focus right now with this decentralization question? Jordan, if you want to kick it off, you're welcome to.
Hey, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think one of the things that I find myself talking about this a lot on different podcasts and stuff is like we are in a moment of definitional crisis of just not, like, nobody knows what anything is. We don't know what men are. We don't know what women are. We don't know what a family is. We don't know what a marriage is. We don't know, and those are kind of broadly touched on in the culture. But we also don't know, I mean, this is lesser talked about. Well, we don't know what governments are. And we don't know what money is. And so I think that, a lot of the difficulty of even talking about what should be decentralized is, like, what are we drawing on to even answer that kind of a question? We all have these ideas, whether or not we've, developed them fully or, thought them through fully. I think that's part of what I would want to talk about before we even get to answering the question is, like, how do we understand what the role of government is? How do we understand what the role of what money is, and what is the basis for that understanding? And so, yeah, I think that this is a big issue, a really big problem. But until we are willing to submit ourselves to an authority by which we're going to, I mean, there's a pastor who's pretty controversial. His name is Douglas Wilson. And the question anytime anybody makes a truth claim, he'll just basically say, by what standard? What is the standard that you're appealing to? in trying to make these kind of truth claims and trying to, say that we should do this thing. And so I think that would be maybe a helpful place to start before we, to try to affirm some sort of basis for the things that we're going to posit.
Yeah, and obviously Christianity has a very hefty truth claim. So I think a lot of Christians kind of find themselves at odds with when we're building all these different technologies because of that. There's different philosophies that are competing in the space, right? And we're all working on a lot of times the same technology. Sometimes we have a lot of very similar goals, but they're not necessarily the same goals. So, and there might be a lot of people with libertarian politics here, and, of course, nothing wrong with that. But I do find, specifically in the Bitcoin space, there is a little bit of a rub there with Christians in the space versus libertarians, or, even more extreme anarcho-libertarians who just want absolutely no, limits on their personal freedoms. And sometimes Christianity is going to say, well, hold up, like, there are goods that are in society that should be encouraged, and we have to find a way to do that. So Father Ian has his hand up. Why don't you go ahead and take it off? And then I was actually going to ask Super Testnet, because we kind of had this question too about libertarianism.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think my approach to the topic of technology is not primarily a moral or political question, but a simple matter of utility. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. It seems like you guys, the assumption, and I was trying to wrap my mind around some of the assumptions of the tech world, is that the technology will solve moral, spiritual, and political problems. I really don't approach this technology of question about that at all. I actually just see it as purely utility and focusing on utility of specific projects. And I don't think necessarily, first of all, I was wondering about this. I didn't want to be the jerk who I think hierarchies are built into nature, and I think they're a fundamental aspect of reality. I don't think Bitcoin or any of these other technologies are going to solve inequality in any kind of meaningful way. I think inequality is not simply about human design. It's a fabric of reality, and we could defend that based on scripture and tradition. That being said, I think Christians have to respond. I call myself a tech realist, which is blockchain will be used extensively across the board. There's no doubt about it. I mean, once you understand the technology, Bitcoin is, I was just talking about this with Carl today. Bitcoin is going to disrupt a lot of industries, including some really big dinosaurs, because it's going to be able to do things quicker, more efficient, with greater stability. And I don't know if that's going to necessarily make life better. I wouldn't say that, but I'll open up for that. I don't want to talk too much.
Yeah, and this is a very informal conversation, so if people just want to kind of like hop in and talk, you don't have to, raise your hand necessarily, unless, of course, the conversation gets pretty heavy. But I did want to throw it.
I just had a quick question for Father Ian. You do bring up a great point about hierarchies being natural part of nature, but do they have to be financial in nature? Because in nature, these hierarchies are not financial. But yeah, that's my question. That's it. Like, do they have to be necessarily? Does the hierarchy necessarily have to be tied to money?
I think on a practical level, I've always said this, the powers that be, the world will not allow for people to, if Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies are undermining national currencies, then they'll just get shut down. That's Carl. Carl and Eddie have worked a lot on the regulatory environment for cryptos and tokens and tokenization. I think we're kind of in a little bit of a moment like Napster, when you could download anything on the internet. And I think that environment will disappear pretty quickly from the conversations that I have. Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't want to hog the conversation. I know I'm saying a lot of provocative things, but let's bounce it around. I'll let you guys talk.
Jordan, you've had your hand up. Go ahead, and then we'll get to it.
Yeah, Father. I guess I try to be as realistic as possible, and I am not like a Bitcoin utopian where I think that Bitcoin's going to fix everything. I don't feel that way at all. At the same time, I do think that something like the internet has been just as disruptive to governments in many ways. I mean, at least you could argue. Obviously, there's ways in which it's provided centralization and provided lots of tools for them. But I mean, you can pretty easily argue that it's been a pretty net win for for somewhat of a decentralization or human flourishing. I guess I wouldn't say Bitcoin's going to do away with hierarchy. I think hierarchy is awesome. I think hierarchy is gets a bad rap. I would be as skeptical as you are on that front. I think what Bitcoin does do away with is partiality. I think that's the bigger issue. That's the bigger deal in which Christians should care about, is the fact that and this is something that's condemned by the Apostle James, is condemned by Paul, Peter. I mean, all the greats in terms of just like this is not something God doesn't want us to doesn't want the rich to be shown favoritism over the poor, or the poor to be shown favoritism over the rich. And so I think that having a monetary system that has a set of rules that can't be changed by the rich against the poor, or vice versa, in our the current political environment that we're in, there's lots of desire to favor the poor over against the rich, and so I think both of those are problematic. And so, yeah, I don't think we're going to do away with hierarchy. I don't think anyone's under the. I mean, there's going to be people who have tons of Bitcoin who are going to be incredibly, powerful if Bitcoin does anything approaching what we think it could do, or at least reaches the value levels that we think it's going to approach. So I don't think. I'm certainly not against hierarchy, but I do think, like I said, partiality is a different story, and I think that we and every Christian could long for the day when partiality is done away with, or at least moving towards that.
Yeah, thanks for that. If Carlos pops in, he needs to introduce himself, but I think he's been having internet issues. I'm going to throw it to Super Testnet to answer that question about decentralization, especially from a tech side. I mean, do you just kind of see, I guess, things developing the way, say, Father Ian and Jordan do?
I think decentralization is a means to an end, and the end that we seek through decentralization is a certain type of equality, that there's no one in control over a protocol like Bitcoin or like money or identity, that everyone has the ability to participate in the system on an equal basis. And that's the real goal that decentralization strives, or that I try to strive for, and writing decentralized technology assists with that. But it's not appropriate for absolutely everything. I do think that centralization brings a lot of benefits. For example, in the development process of an application, you can be a lot faster. You can be a lot more organized if you have a centralized leader who's calling the shots. And we're going to focus on this, and we're not going to focus on that. So I admire those things, and I want those things. They're benefits. That they help. But it has its place. Not everything should be centralized, and not everything should be decentralized. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't want to change the question now too much, but maybe if I can just follow up with Super Testnet. I guess I see things pretty much the same way you do. But then, so my question is, is there inherent good for Christians to say you're working in Bitcoin? Is there inherent good for Christians to be working in this space? And if so, why? Because if decentralization is real, if we really do see a decentralized future, it doesn't matter, the tech, nobody controls the tech, so anybody can just do what they want, right? So why is it there's no power, if I can speak very clearly, there's no power to be gained, by building these technologies, because it's a decentralized technology, right? So why, should Christians be building these things? And if so, why? What's your answer for that?
You say there's no power to be gained, but I think the fundamental power that I seek in my life is the power of good. The power of assisting my fellow humans to become the best versions of themselves, become holy. And I think every good thing helps with that. So, if the Apostle James says that every good and perfect gift comes from the Heavenly Father, if Bitcoin's good, then it comes from Him, and I want to be a part of helping improve and perfect these good gifts that the Father gives us. So, I think there's no human or worldly power that comes from that, but or at least that's not the part that I'm interested in. But the power of being a child of God and of helping other people live out their calling as children of God is something I'm greatly interested in. And a better money, one that's free from the machinations of evil people, is is a great help toward that goal.
Yeah, I definitely worded my question a little Machiavellian, maybe, but I guess really what I was getting at is, I mean, this is at least my worry, like, especially with Bitcoin, like people talk, oh, it's just going to be the way it is. Like they kind of see it as this inevitable thing. And my worry is that it's not necessarily that. And if like Christians aren't involved with building these systems and setting these systems up, at this beginning stage, at these early stages, then other people are going to be involved. And, the question is like, what are the purposes and what are the beliefs and the values that are getting built into these technologies at these early stages? Um, let's do this. Carlos,
Oh,
go ahead.
did you want us to jump on that question, or did you want to?
I do, but Carlos has
No
been
problem.
hopping back in and out of the space, so I wanted to just briefly introduce himself, and then if you could add to this conversation right now, that'd be great.
Can you hear me there?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Sorry. Yeah, I'm here now. Do you want me to introduce myself or something?
Yeah, if you could just tell people about what you've been doing with your open source AI, and
Right.
then so we're talking about the question about decentralization and why Christians should be building, open source decentralized technologies. So maybe you can add to that combo too.
Yeah. So, since a few months ago, well, I have been working on AI for the past, I don't know, like 2.5 years or so, maybe a little bit longer. But, I have an AI company, an AI solutions company. So we build solutions, and I realized how I will say alignment is important, but it's not alignment. It's more like shaping the personality and the core values of the model. So every model is different. For example, I don't know, ChatGPT is a little bit more like robotic. Um, Cloud sounds like as if it was like traumatized or something, like as if they beat him at house or whatever at home. So every model it's kind of like a human psyche, and depends on how you train them. It's the results that they will give. Even like depends of the personality that you gave them. It will end up being good at certain tasks. Like the benchmarks and all of that. So I start training these models with that in mind, and eventually like I came up to the conclusion that it was kind of hard to align AI to the whole humanity, because even itself, like humanity is not aligned. Everyone's opinions. There are multiple religions, multiple ideologies, sociopolitical structures, even. So it's very hard to align an AI to the whole humanity, because in order to do that, you will first need to align humanity itself. So to solve that was to align specific individual AIs to their creators. So like instead of being aligned to the whole humanity, it will be aligned to their specific creator or their owner.
And Carlos is a Orthodox Christian, so we have the triad of Christianity here now. Cool. Okay. Well, let's jump the conversation around. I know Father Ian, you popped in right before Carlos jumped in.
Okay, let me jump in. I think, why should Christians be in a space? I would call myself a tech realist, which is I would view countries, things as ecosystems. So if you think about natural ecosystems, let's say you're really good at hunting deer. Sorry, that's the doorbell. Let's say you're really good at hunting deer and you're in the forests of North America. And then you get moved to Saudi Arabia and you have to adapt to the desert. Like, you don't say, why do I need to adapt to the desert because the forest was wonderful? I love the forest. No, you suck it up and you adapt to the ecosystem. Blockchain is going to be a part of the ecosystem. It's pretty much inevitable. It's a question of who's going to dominate the field with utility. I think a lot of projects with blockchain, and I think we can go into AI. That's a different subject. But with blockchain, it's really at this point a race to utility. It's a house of cards that's built on speculation at this point, and it's really just a race to utility. Who's going to create projects that have real world applications for their blockchains, for their projects? And I think on a practical level, I think I have seen in the church world where we were spinning our wheels for like 10 years about whether we should be on social media. I remember as a seminarian, and they were still debating if we should even allow priests and seminarians to have social media accounts, which is kind of hilarious now, if you think about it. The reality is it's just the environment. It's the ecosystem. Blockchain will be a dominant part. And it's a matter of just using it. There's a lot of use cases for the church world, for different projects that we're working on. And it's really just utility at the end of the day.
I just want to caution against saying anything will be a certain way. Because that ventures into the land of prophecy. And we want technology. As technologists, we want technology to be a certain way. We want it to help us live longer and live happier and devote more of our lives to God and our families. But we don't know that that's what God's going to do. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, Jordan, I know you had your hand up, so if you want to jump in here, and then we could probably throw it to Matt at Catholic Crypto.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, this is kind of tricky because we're jumping back and forth and answering different questions. But the question I initially raised my hand to talk about was why should Christians be in this space? And I think the thing that just comes to mind, there's a number of different things. I think one of the biggest problems that itself in all kinds of different ways is it's basically like we live in a world that basically as a result of fiat currency and a number of other things basically lives in like perpetual denial of sowing and reaping. This is during the first year getting into Bitcoin. This is like 2019. I was pastoring our church and I was doing sermon prep one day. I was reading through Galatians. And in Galatians 6, the Apostle Paul says that God is not mocked. For what a man sows, that will he also reap. And so I just started to try to think of ways to rephrase that. And so I was like, okay, what are some examples of this? The thought that came to mind was, okay, Paul is saying that so hardwired this principle of sowing and reaping into the fabric of the universe that to deny it is to mock. And so I just tried to think about, okay, what are some other examples? And so the first thing that came to mind was with the Philippians, right? Paul says to them that if they're not willing to work, then neither should they eat. And so there's a sowing and reaping built in there. Paul says the point of food is to give you energy to work. So if you're not working, then you shouldn't get more energy that you're not stewarding effectively. And then you go in, you can go down the line and see all these different things. God has a logic and like a sowing and reaping design for sex. You get married and then you enjoy the fruits of sex, or fruits of marriage, which are sex and children. These are just the ways that God has designed the world. He's designed in order, a certain logic, that these things are done in. And so basically the thing that hit me as a result, as I'm thinking about Bitcoin and stuff, was just the reality that with fiat currency, it's basically governments like trying to live out of sowing and reaping. It's trying to live where governments effectively unlimited amounts of money to give effectively unlimited power. This is a template that's as old as time. This is the first thing the serpent said to Adam and Eve was that you will, if you do this, if you take the fruit, you can be like God. And so I think this is the perpetual temptation, people, and especially for governments all throughout time, has been to try to take hold of these technologies. Whether that's a Babel or whether that's something like this, is to take hold of a technology and wield technology for their own glory rather than for the glory of God and the good of people. And so, again, when I think about Bitcoin, and I think about like what it's doing. I think in terms of just decentralizing that main that main force that they're then used to do so many other things. It just reminds me of the book of Psalms 2, where it's just to read a few verses here. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. So this is this desire. So God's keeping these nations from being able to be autonomous. And how do they respond to that? They don't want to be held accountable by anybody, including God. And so they want to cast off these bonds, cast these things apart, these cords away from them. They want to do whatever they want to do. And so I look at the last 50 years, we've had, effectively completely fiat currency over the world that's enabled endless war. It's enabled, perpetual abortion, perpetual funding of abortions, in Africa and in all America. It's enabled all kinds of things. I mean, just gender stuff. I mean, it's enabled all kinds of governments to further these ideas in ways that never would have been possible. That would have been unthinkable in pretty much any other point to at least reach the scale that they have at any other point in human history. And so I look at the Christian role in this. Like our role is to be faithful and to testify and live according with the way that God has designed the world to work. And so God's made a scarce world in which He is King, and our responsibility and faithfulness, role and faithfulness is to submit ourselves to that and seek to use our scarce lives and our scarce resources for His glory, rather than just looking at those things looking at scarcity as something that inhibits us, that we need to overcome through our own efforts. God, it's not just sowing and reaping that God provides; it's sowing and exponential reaping. So God allows us to, when we provides an exponential benefit. If we plant a seed, then we just get one seed back or one piece of fruit back. We get a tree, that produces more fruit. And so I think this is the thing that I think this is the coolest thing about Bitcoin, is that, it's more aligned with the way that God designed the world to work. And it allows us to agree with God, and say that, scarcity is good. It's something good that God has provided. It also allows us to agree with God with the concerns that the scriptures have about debt. The scriptures in the New Testament say, owe no man anything. And when we look at the world around us, it's very difficult to operate without debt. And so I think that, we see this moving back to, basically Bitcoin or scarce currencies are back to something that's more real, more in line with God designed the world to function. And so I think that our role in that is a good thing, and something we can be excited about participating in.
Well, let me ask you this, Jordan, because I like the analogy of the seed. Even with the Bible verse I shared recently, unless a seed goes into the ground and dies, it remains alone. Right? To see the seed produce fruit, it has to be planted. You have to plant the seed. And so with Bitcoin, I think one thing that kind of scares people away from the conversation a little bit is this kind of these cultish aspects to it, where some people think that, like Naman has said, that it's just inevitable. Like it's a prophecy that Bitcoin is going to accomplish, all these amazing things. And I approach it, I think, like, I'm a Bitcoiner. I believe in Bitcoin, but I believe that it needs to be seeded. And so I would say, Christians need to be involved in this space now, because we need to be planting those seeds so that it can produce that fruit that we want to see. Would you agree with that statement? I mean, how do you kind of approach that?
Yeah, I guess my thing is I don't see it as a foregone conclusion that Bitcoin succeeds. I don't see that at all. I don't see Christians within the Bitcoin space with anywhere near the same level of confidence, or just like with the sense of inevitability that I see in somebody like a Max Kaiser, people like that. I don't see in Max isn't a Christian, so it doesn't surprise me that he's that he responds the way that he does. But again, within
but that kind of scares me too, that maybe there's not a lot of Christians in the space, and that doesn't fill me with hope necessarily either.
I think there are tons of Christians out there. I mean, again, this is not to brag. It blows my mind every time I think about it. But like even thank God for Bitcoin alone. I think the last time we got specs, I think we've sold like 45,000 copies of that book, which is insane, right? So like the fact is, like, people are out there, they're thinking through these issues, and they're trying to figure out, how do we think about Bitcoin? They're trying to figure out, how do we think about the world, and what do we do with this world it seems to be so hopeless in a lot of ways. So again, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion at all. I think Bitcoin we could have a solar flare. The Lord could send us back to the dark ages tomorrow. And, but the fact that could happen, again, with the resources that we have now, and knowing what we know, I think that it makes sense, not for everybody, but I think it makes sense for there to be Christians in the space, like you, like us, who again are we're taking stock of the world. We're looking at what we know God wants in the world. Like, we know God wants his name to be, lifted up and trusted and loved and, proclaimed in the world. And so I think looking at, whatever these decentralizing tools are, something like is one of these tools where, that basically enables the gospel to go, maybe not anything, but within reason. Like, I think God has ways and God has means. And so I think that looking at the ways in which, this is the one thing I talk about with people a lot, and, spend a lot of time thinking about is, just the way in which ministry is hampered by, fiat currency. Every currency in Latin America, Africa, all these places has failed multiple times, 3 to 4 times in the last 50 years. And so there's gospel work that's been done, churches that were planted that, over the course of, let's say, the church was planted 45 years ago. There was monetary resources, there's time resources that were invested. And then, over the course of a number of years, the average fiat currency lasts for 13 to 14 years. And so when those currencies fail, then, all of these resources that would have otherwise, been within these churches end up becoming, inflated away to nothing. And so it really hampers the churches that are in these areas. It affects the people who are, again, sacrificially giving for the sake of the gospel to support their pastors or priests or whatever they are. And so, again, I'm not trying to make this like Bitcoin's this panacea that just automatically fixes everything. The way that I primarily look at it is Bitcoin buys time. And it basically, it's a seed sown in the right direction. Whether or not it actually succeeds to the degree that we hope it does, that's not my responsibility, to really do that. We can only be faithful with the time and resources that we have given to us. And so again, I look at Bitcoin as one tool in the tool belt. I'm grateful that there's plenty of other people working on other tools. But I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, that was great. Thanks, Jordan. All right. So, Catholic Crypto, Matt has his hand up, and then we're going to pass it to Carlos. And then, I think I'm actually going to start bringing in some other people, some other requestees here at the top of the hour. I've known some people at the top of the hour.
Connor, can I finish what I'm saying? I don't know if you guys heard me. I think like my internet just went off.
Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll throw it to Matt, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So no, nothing. Just like it was interesting because in the Bible, in the Apocalypse, it talks about the mark of the beast and how like no one will be able to sell or buy if they don't have the mark. I think Jordan was saying something. He wasn't referencing the Apocalypse, but the Apocalypse mentions like that you won't be able to buy or sell if you don't have the mark of the beast. And I think that's like a sign of centralization. Like if you don't have the ability to buy or sell, like I think in that part, the Bible is like making a reference that the free market is somehow good, like that is like it is necessary, and that the opposite of the free market, which is like centralizing your freedom of action regarding your market actions or whatever, like buying or selling, it's diabolic or whatever. Like I think it's very interesting. I don't know. I just had that thought. And yeah, what I was saying about AI, the point is that I trained Seraph with the Bible, and turns out the Bible is really good at aligning human beings or AIs. So it's a pretty good AI. Yes, if anyone wants to either try it out or get the dataset because it's open source, just send me a DM and I will send you the dataset. In order to actually use the dataset, you'll need to know how to run the training, but I can also help you with that if you need. So yeah, just feel free to send me a DM, and if anyone wants to just like try Seraph, which is what I would recommend because it's already built, just send me a DM and I'll send you the link. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
If you say you actually hear everything that I say, then yes.
I hear you. I hear you. But share it to the jumbotron so people can check it out. Yeah. So let's throw it to Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, yeah, I want to say I agree with Jordan saying, that in general, right, that, fiat is bad. Bitcoin seems to be the best way to break out of that. And so, perhaps we should try to participate in that and try to help it grow. But I do want to get maybe specific and practical with, to answer the question that I think Connor was trying to ask, why should Christians participate in the thing itself, right, in the development. I think, so if you get below the surface of Bitcoin, you realize that there are some debates going on, about, is Bitcoin perfect the way it is? Should we ossify and not make any more changes? Changes have been made since, it came out in 2009. And so you have whatever, should we keep making changes and then what's that process and all that? Anyway, even beyond changes to the core protocol, you could look at some of the work like SuperTestnet is doing by building an L2 and the direction that those things go in and the research goes into. So anyway, my point is, I think in my head I've got two examples of Catholics in the Bitcoin space who seem to be doing something different than everybody else. And so for example, right, you've got Luke Dasher is, Bitcoin core developer. He's been keeping up with his, what do you call it? Maybe a fork, but not a fork like a fork, but,
his mining pool or
Bitcoin
Aegis?
Bitcoin nuts. Yeah. And so it's an alternative to Bitcoin Core, right? And so, he's been keeping that up, so that there is an alternative, there's not this monopoly on, what Bitcoin software people are running. And he, we can maybe debate the morals of whether or not, people should be able to add data to their transactions, right? That he's very much against, and Bitcoin Knots is very much against. But anyway, so that's one thing. And then Ocean as well. So he's running this mining pool. And mining itself in Bitcoin is incredibly centralized, and he is offering an alternative. Again, we can debate whether or not paying people on the Coinbase transaction is the best, or whatever, but he is, valuing this decentralization and this self-custodialship, anyway, I haven't, and maybe there are other people who are, trying to pioneer decentralized, mining or different mining pools. But he's one example. And then the SuperTestnet actually, I think is another great example. I think he is like, how do I want to say it? Like he's almost doing the most, like he's values self-custody more than a lot of other people who are developing things on Bitcoin, right? So even when it comes to BitVM, his version of it, allows for unilateral exit, so that you don't have to trust anyone after the setup, or this whole Hedgehog protocol, right, is again built around, the ability, it's an L2, but it's built around, this idea that he wants people to be able to withdraw back to the main chain and not have to trust, not have to rely on somebody else to facilitate that, right? There are so many, and I'm doing finger quotes, right? L2s and rollups and whatever else that are multi-sigs, and I don't know. I think a lot of other people, maybe don't care so much. Maybe they're trying to hide it. Maybe they don't care and they're being public about, levels of custody, in levels of trust assumptions, that you might want, in a federation or in a eCashment or in things like that. So anyway, I think to get to, I'm rambling here. I'm trying to form my thoughts, but to get to Connor's question, why should Christians be building in the space? I think, if you could try to imagine without SuperTestnet doing the work he's been doing, with Hedgehog, with BitVM, with Uniswap, with some of these other things, and without Luke Dasher doing the things he's been doing with Bitcoin Knots or the ocean mining. The whole development. These are just two examples, but I think the whole development space might be in a different direction, right? They might have abandoned some of these ideas of unilateral exit or self-custody or decentralization, and not obviously completely, but they. I don't know. These are two people who develop in the space who seem to be, at least in some regards, countercultural to the rest of the developers and the directions of development that are going on. And I could be wrong. Super Testnet, if you want to tell me that there's actually 100 other decentralized mining pools and 100 other people building L2s with unilateral exit. I don't know this landscape completely, but these are, anyway, I think two good examples of, we can debate whether or not those are quite Christian values, but these are two Catholics who have been emphasizing values focusing on certain values in a different way than other people have in the space. I think that's kind of cool to see, and I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah, I would too. And one of the central ideas that's kind of guided a lot of my thinking, especially since I was trying to get Brantley onto the space. Unfortunately, couldn't make it. But I think everybody should know exactly what happened with that situation. Even if you don't like Ethereum, Brantley Milligan is a strong Catholic, and what he was working on with decentralized identity on the ENS protocol, I think is extremely well reasoned. So one of the guiding ideas that's really kind of, guided my thinking here is Lawrence Lessig's ideas about code is law. There's a book on it. There's also a rather short article for people who don't have that kind of attention span that I think gets the key points across. You can find it online. But essentially Lawrence was theorizing kind of at the beginning of the internet and saying, hey, listen, these protocols that we're building, these internet protocols are going to define the way interactions happen online. And it's going to embed inherently values into the way we interact online. And so one of the ways that it does that is right now we have this concept of identity that's very siloed, where you might have an identity on X, you have a different identity on Facebook, you have a different identity on whatever. Usernames, passwords are all site specific. And this was something that we kind of somehow decided that was the way it was going to be when we started writing these protocols that have now basically defined the internet now. And so because of that, if X decides that, they don't like your views, which the previous administration with X was like this, right? They can just ban you and you lose all of that. You lose that whole identity. You lose all the people following you. You lose that communication channel just wiped out like that. Right. And so the question is, can we embed these future values? I mean, these future technologies with different values now, because we're building these technologies right now. They're not built yet. We have this opportunity that we also had back in, the early 1990s when Lawrence Lessig was writing. But we missed those opportunities then. We don't have to miss them now. We can start building these technologies with Christian values. So that's really what I want to do. I want to encourage Christians. Hey, we need to be building this space. We need to be having these conversations. We need to be engaging this now because, we already lost the war for the present, but we're in a war for the future, and we're fighting it right now with the technologies that we built. Super Testnet, if you want to respond to that, because I know Matt mentioned you a couple times, and then we brought Joy Rapture in. I think he might have some questions. We'll throw it to him.
I do, but let's let Joy speak first. He's had his hand up for longer.
Okay, yeah, totally fair. Joy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll make this quick because I've got a toddler over there, and I don't know how long I can keep the silence. But so I got into Bitcoin because of the human rights aspects. Kind of what one of the guys was talking about kind of the mark of the beast and the whole idea that that a centralizing one world government is emerging, where even if individual monies are not fully centralized, they can be functionally centralized through data. And that just makes us very vulnerable. I like what one of the other guys was saying, I believe it was Jordan, was saying about how these sorts of technologies, they are not a panacea, but a stopgap. But one of the big things that I find to be very dangerous and oft overlooked in Bitcoin land is privacy, because out of privacy comes fungibility. And we could see an example of this with the Canadian truckers, how anyone who donated to the Canadian truckers were persecuted along with the Canadian truckers. So even if your chain is permissionless, you're still, the end user is still on the hook for coercion. And, so like I've been really trying to plug away at finding what sort of technology could I run an underground railroad on? What sort of technology could I have churches using in an underground network in mainland China, for instance, or even some more hostile situation? And the one of the biggest things, more than scalability, to me, is the fungibility, the privacy, and the problem that it needs to be on layer 1. Because a layer 2 is just kicking the can down the road. It's actually very, layer 2 solutions are very vulnerable. And they often, you just watch the layer 1 and wait till the person has to go back to layer 1 and ding them there. So I'd kind of moved away from Bitcoin into kind of Monero land. And then I was like, well, you really, your stores and your networks and stuff are also going to be persecuted. So you have to protect not just your transfer of money, but your transfer of communication and stores and stuff. And so I've been looking for smart contracts to go on top of privacy, all on layer 1. And I've only seen 2 solutions that can actually do it, which is, I'm not going to shill things here, but I've only found 2. But because this is Christian decentralized talk, I want to bring up Isaiah 39:4-2, where it said Hezekiah was pleased to show them his treasure house, them being Babylon. He showed them the silver, the gold, the spices, the precious oils, his entire armory, absolutely everything. And there was nothing in his house, nor in all his area of dominion, that Hezekiah did not show them. And we know that Hezekiah was one of the very few righteous kings, but he, because of his imprudence with, basically he wasn't thinking adversarially. He was not thinking about how people could exploit his kindness. And as Christians, we need to do that with our technology. Currently, there is no privacy solution on Bitcoin, like none. And I've looked at all of them. Like, I think I've looked at all of them. But it's just something that I'd like to talk about more when I have more time to. Like maybe if you're doing this again, I'd love to come on again. But I think privacy is really, really key, because even if you have permissionlessness, people can still get you. And not only that, it's there forever. So if I do something now, it may be okay now. But if you have a turnkey tyranny where, let's say 10 or even 20 years down the line, let's say Jesus doesn't come back, and 20 years down the line, all of a sudden this whole place is looking like a very, very bad place. Well, they can look at my history. They can cross-reference it with Facebook and Meta and all these other things. I'll cross-reference it with my IP address and what I've been buying with my social credit score, even my geolocations. And they can triangulate everything I do. So, yeah, anyway, that was a whole bunch of stuff, but I just kind of want to put that out there. And that's what I've been trying to educate people on is like looking for other ways of resilience, not get rich schemes, which I don't think any of you guys are, but just like, how do you be truly, truly protected from coercion and force. Because once you have your network where it's resilient to like a unilateral multinational attack, then you can start talking about all these other things to build on it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Super Testament, if you just want to respond.
Actually, the thing I wanted to bring up was something you mentioned earlier, which is about having lost the battle for decentralization of the internet. And I don't think that's true. Part of what I want to mention here is that it's very easy to confuse centralization with popularity. And to say because Google services and Amazon services are so very popular, therefore the internet is centralized around them. But they're not. Like there are freely open and available alternatives to every Google service and every Amazon service that are provided, and they're widely used. Like lots of people use them. But it's very easy to think, well, because it's not billions, everything's centralized, and that's not what centralization means. Centralization is when you don't have the opportunity to use alternatives to some central service. And on the internet, we do. We absolutely do. So I really value that. I don't think it's true that the internet has lost or that we lost the battle for decentralization on the internet. I think we won by making these alternatives available and keeping them available. It's just, they're not very popular, but I think that's just because the services provided by Google and Amazon are so good, that no one wants to use the other ones.
Sure. And maybe I can clarify slightly too with my point, but and it's not even really my point. It's this other guy, Lawrence Lessig. But it's not really that. I'm not really making the claim that we lost the battle for decentralization, although I have heard other people say that. I'm just saying that the way the technology was built, it was built with this potential, for these single points of failures. We had the option to embed certain values into the way, and one of the values could have been decentralization into the way the internet was set up. Not just so that there's alternatives per se, but that's so the architecture of the web itself, was such that the type of technology that we see today wouldn't have developed. And I don't think it's necessarily just an internet argument. I think this is really just with anything. Any way you build something, right? What's the claim? We build a technology, and then afterwards our technology, builds us or shapes us. We shape our technology, and afterwards the technology shapes us. So we set up the architecture in such a way that the present moment exists, and we don't necessarily have to set up the architecture of the future the same way, right? So maybe it's a slightly different claim, but I do see your point there. Of course, there are alternatives, but the question with Bitcoin is, can you set up an architecture in such a way that the right of access is preserved just unilaterally? I think it's maybe slightly different.
And then on the question of privacy, I'm really grateful that in Bitcoin, privacy, you have privacy by default. And the reason for that is of course because no one uses Bitcoin by default. But the moment you start using Bitcoin, you don't have to give away the fact that you're using it. You can keep your default privacy by just not letting anyone know that you've used Bitcoin, and not building up a history of a transaction history that's traceable to you. So I'm really grateful that Bitcoin's enabled that possibility. And if you're looking into if you're looking into how to preserve your privacy on Bitcoin, I think stealth addresses are a great way to do that. They help a whole lot. The Lightning Network, uses these things called coin swaps to transfer one UTXO to another person without going on chain and revealing that link. Coin swaps are a really great way to do that. So I encourage you to look into some of these technologies and keep your default privacy that you have in Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, I think that the need for privacy is really important. Again, I don't think it's that people aren't focusing on it. I think it's it's a question of making the perfect the enemy of the good, I think, is the issue. And again, I'm not minimizing the privacy at all. In fact, again, I think about it all the time. This is why I would probably catch heat from from the purest of Bitcoiners. Again, I just had a call earlier today, and there was a guy who was asking me about different cryptocurrencies, and I just said to him, I was like, hey, like if you want me to make the case, if you want to make a case for for using only Bitcoin, I can do that for you. I mean, I'm happy to do that, and like I personally don't hold anything except for Bitcoin. And at the same time, like I'm in a group, for example, I'm in this group chat with a few hundred people from a different country, and it's like a Bitcoin buy sell group. And within this group, you can find anything for sale under the sun. There's Amazon gift cards, there's Tron, there's anything you can think of, and it's just people trying to move money. And so, especially I'm not going to begrudge someone who again hasn't done the work to sit there and like look through all these good arguments. They're sitting there just trying to move. They're just trying to move money. They're just trying to live. And so, again, whether it's like Christians moving money for for the sake of the gospel, like we've talked to a number of people who are missionaries who are using there's some of them using Bitcoin, which is fantastic, but then there's other ones who are using like stable coins. There's a number of them doing different things. And so again, I think obviously I would love to see more work done to increase the privacy of Bitcoin while still acknowledging with super testnet, Lightning's good for that. Some of the what's the other one? The one that Fedi's working on, like Fedi Mints and stuff. They're working on similar things. They really are prioritizing privacy. But again, I think the thing where, I think it is just the space is still so small right now. It's ridiculous. Like it's ridiculous how little the space is, and I think that wider adoption and Bitcoin price, as Bitcoin price continues to increase, we'd love to live in a world where everyone is just so thoughtful, and we only do things if they make philosophical sense, and we reason everything out. But the reality is that almost everyone who's here probably got here because Bitcoin's price started going crazy, and that just is that's what grabs our attention. And so again, I have friends who use Monero. I have friends who buy Bitcoin with Monero to try to leverage some of the privacy things. And again, I'm not going to begrudge anybody doing those things. So I just think there's not losing sight of the big goals. Even because I guess what I'm saying is like even if you can be punished after the fact, in some situations. Again, this is one of these things where I just feel like Bitcoin, like money can't fix everything. Like you can't fix everything. Like there's so many things where we need people to stand up and be brave. We need people to stand up and say, we're not doing this. We're not going to allow this. We're going to continue doing these things because they're right. And because, just being willing to do what they think is right, even if it does cost them or cost, people in the beginning or, I think that's the bigger, that's the currency that's even more scarce, right? Is courage in a lot of places. So, I think that again, I want to acknowledge and agree with everything Super Testnet said and some of the other things that were said. But I think that part of these, again, fixing the money fixes a number of things. It fixes a lot of the incentives. It fixes a lot of good things. But some of this is just people have to get on board and stand up and and fix things that can't be fixed by money.
Cool. Joy Rapture, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to, I agree that like courage and values supersedes all technology. So it's like technology is downstream from character. So I really like what he's saying there. As far as privacy, there is no privacy on Bitcoin. And I've looked at a bunch of solutions. Now there's different levels where maybe you won't have quite the same ease of financial voyeurism for like the public. But as far as backdoors or things without multi-sig, without trustlessness, like people are like, oh, coin joins will make me private. No, they won't. Lightning Network will make me private. No, they won't. These things are very superficial privacy, which I think is the most dangerous kind because it lures people into a false sense of security. And because of the permanency of the chain, it's like everything you do now, even if you only use Bitcoin, like if you're just a Bitcoin purist, well, everyone that you touch with your Bitcoin, they might have KYC. And so there's a thing called shadow profiles that Facebook Meta does. And what that is even if you've never used Facebook, they can basically outline, you cast a digital shadow because of all the friends that you interact with. And they can actually trace out and have an algorithm that is basically making your profile, even though you've never signed up. This is the sort of, with AI chain analytics, what it can do with shadow profiles is so far beyond what I think most people realize is coming down the pike. I think they'll be very surprised in the upcoming years. And I just don't want Christians to be caught off guard. Anyway, things are getting loud, so I'm going to mute.
Yeah, I think the privacy discussion is super interesting. I actually, when Tornado Cache, I don't know if anybody's that familiar with that project, but it was sanctioned by the U.S. government, and was shut down. It was an
Exactly.
Ethereum protocol for privacy. And I was pretty active when that was going down. I was it was actually an Element server, and a few devs were trying to keep that alive amidst the sanctions. Just watching, I was illegal as a U.S. citizen to participate, to play with it, but I was just I was keeping tabs on that. I might actually publish some information about that here in the near future. But I think privacy is a huge issue that Bitcoin can continue to solve for. And I would like to see more development in this space, but might be a topic for another day. But I do think that it's a good topic for today, that these are the things that we need to be building, and Christians can contribute to this space. And that's one of the things that we can help to contribute to, right? Through building. So I know, listen, I'm willing to go have the conversation as long as people are willing to talk. But I do want to be respectful of some people's time. And I think Super Testnet, you said you're in Prague, so it must be super late right now.
2:30 now.
30, nice. I was in Prague last year. I would like to say it was a beautiful country, but it was at the end of the trip. We did Vienna, and we did Budapest, and we ended up in Prague. And we left. We had to leave like a day early because we just were so sick of it. But I think if we were there fresh, it would have been a beautiful country. And I also know Prague has that famous Bitcoin, what is it, like a Bitcoin cafe, I guess? That's kind of cool. So
yeah, I've been spending every day pretty much at Paralelní Polis, which is it's not just a Bitcoiner thing. I think it's kind of like a libertarian commune almost. But they've been very generous and have provided. I've been spending time at their coffee shop where you can pay with Bitcoin, and at their co-working space, and that's been great. So thank you for them, even though they're libertarians.
Yeah. No, totally fair. Yeah. And something else too, I'm just remembering, Václav Benda, is let's see. So Prague would be Czech. So he would have been a Czech. He would have been Czechoslovakian before they split. Christian, Catholic thinker. And he wrote some really interesting things about building kind of alternative structures in society. I think it would be a really good read for anybody to check out his book. That's interested in the space, decentralized alternatives. It wasn't technology at the time, but I think it could be very well applied to technology. So good Catholic thinker, Václav Benda, Czechoslovakian. Okay, but like I said, I want to be respectful of people's time. And before we lose Super Testnet, because it is so late, I did also want to kind of throw this out there. But if we're Christians and we're building in the space, specifically, most of this conversation has been on Bitcoin. I would have loved to talk about some other things, but that's kind of the nature of spaces. There's only so much we can get to. On Bitcoin, what should Christians be focusing on? What if the church was going to take an eye to it too? Like how could the church use this technology and also ensure a stake in however the technology develops in the future? Like where should be Christians focus here? If you want to respond first, Super Test, and then we can just go around the panel.
I would love for monks to get involved. I feel like monastic mining is something that could really take off. Monks who live in a kind of separate lifestyle from the rest of us, they they have to provide for themselves an income somehow. And they really emphasize throughout the history of the church the concept of proof of work. Monks are always the ones laboring in the fields, tilling the vines, and making sure that the earth produces the fruits that feed the people, and give wine to the people. And I think if they got into mining, that would be great. Because that's also proof of work. But it's done in a way that I think is really conducive to their kind of lifestyle. You can be really separate from the world and still contributing to it. So, I would love to see monastic communities start running Bitcoin miners and see where that goes.
Bro, we are on the same page. So actually, I think I've talked about this with Matt at the Catholic Crypto account too. But so one of the things I hear a lot,
I would do that.
and we're going to go around the panel. I'm not going to dominate. Yeah, because so a lot of Christians are like, oh, we need Christians. The best thing we can do is get churches tithing with Bitcoin. I agree. That would be great. Have offerings in Bitcoin, start using the systems. That would be a good thing. But like ultimately, it's like, bro, if we could get the church like mining Bitcoin, because most people here, Bitcoin is probably somewhat familiar with some of the issues, but like you can be a mining company that promotes things that you want to promote, right? Like Luke Dasher basically did this with what was it? It's ocean mining, right? So like, why shouldn't like the church be involved in this as an institution, and start validating transactions and being a source where Christians can connect to these nodes that are maintained by like monastic orders? That would just be so cool to me. And I think that would probably be one of the best ways that Christians can ensure a stake in the development of this technology. Sure, the users, those are stakeholders, but the miners, that's a huge stakeholder in Bitcoin. So I think that's like 100% one of the best things the church could be doing right now. Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things, the thing that's most present for me that I'm just thinking about is, I just look at, I can't even enjoy Bitcoin's price going up because like all I see when I think about Bitcoin's price going up is purchasing power of churches, nonprofit organizations, missions organizations going down. And I think that's the thing for me that is, I think that we're working towards, at least, is just like trying to facilitate this conversation for as many, churches and Christian groups as we can. Just because that's the reality. Like this has happened multiple times in other countries. It's happening here. I just found out yesterday my alma mater, the college that I went to, is basically just furloughed all their teachers because they can't make the finances work. And so I just have seen more and more of that. I've seen more and more Christian schools closing. And so again, just when your denominator is broken, you can't make things work. And so that's the thing that I'm working on the most, is just trying to help Christians understand just the value propositions that aren't necessarily intuitive, and trying to just continue to kind of tell my story, and just really want to help as many churches as possible, avoid the loss of purchasing power that has come all over the world and now is coming increasingly here.
Yeah, and I know you have the Thank God for Bitcoin conferences coming up. Do you have like an announcement you could just show to the Jumbotron for people?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that right here. But yeah, it's going to be July.
It coincides. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, it coincides with the Bitcoin Magazine conference. We're the 2 days before them, so they're the 26th and 27th. We're the 24th and 25th. You can find out more information at tgfb.com. I will pin our thing in the nest. But yeah, so we're gonna have a bunch of Christian speakers, there's a ton of different people. So we got obviously Jörg Guido Holzmann, who's an economist, fellow at the Mises Institute. I'm sure would want nothing to do with the the Libertarian Party as representative of what they voted the other day. But yeah, so we're gonna have some of those there. We're gonna have Nate Fisher. Nate's an investor. We're gonna have, again, several pastors. Just a bunch of different guys who are gonna be there, and just talking about different things. So again, just the basic breakdown is that let's see here. How do I do this? I share this tweet. The basic idea is that day one, here we go, figured it out. day one is basically like a Christian, kind of like a Christian economic conference from a high level. Like what is economics? What is, how do we think about these things? How should we think about them? What does the scripture say about them? And then day two is going to be more into, what does Bitcoin have to do with Jerusalem? It's kind of how I've been framing it to people is, how do these things that we see in the scriptures and that, the priorities that God's given us, in what ways does Bitcoin intersect Bitcoin and other tools as well? We'll talk a little bit about Nostr. We will talk about mining. This is going to be a couple guys from an organization called, what is it called? Gridless, Eric Hirschman. And then one of his business partners is going to be there. They do mining in Africa. And so there's lots of just really interesting things that I would love to see the church get involved in there. Actually, fun story on that. One of the things he was saying was that all over Africa, there are these abandoned small hydroelectric plants that were built by the Catholic Church over the past few decades and are just at the point where they've just been abandoned. And so he was, as a Protestant, just wishing that, you could get some forward thinking, generationally thinking, again, from his perspective, obviously this is the people who he's involved with, Protestant missionaries, missions organizations, to invest and think long term and invest in, rebuilding these things, buying them up, for relatively cheap, and then rebuilding them to facilitate Bitcoin mining, as a way. This is, again, that's just a way, that would be a way to avoid having to move money across the world. If you can mine the Bitcoin right there and then sell them locally and avoid some of the US based, stigma that comes with, money coming from the United States as a result of our foreign policy and stuff. So lots of cool stuff. We'd love to have you. You can find out more information at tgfb.com, and we'll use, if you want to use promo code, Bitcoin, we'll give you 20% off your ticket, for anybody.
I'm sorry, were you done?
Yeah. How much?
Oh, okay.
Where did I cut off?
We lost you, Jordan. Or at least we heard you just say yeah, but the rest, you stopped right after saying you can get a discount for buying with Bitcoin.
Sorry, you gave the promo code.
I'm sorry. That's what I was leaving off, was right there. I wanted to let somebody else go. But yeah, that's...
Wait, what was it a promo code? Sorry, maybe I missed.
Yes.
Was that a promo code, or was that, you said you buy with Bitcoin, you get the discount?
No, correct. It was a promo code. So we give a promo code for 20% off if you use promo code Bitcoin at checkout.
Okay, cool. I'm going to be there. I don't have a ticket yet, but I am going to be there. And so if anybody else, it's kind of cool because it'll be around Bitcoin, Nashville. It used to be Bitcoin Miami. So if anybody else is going to be around the conference, hit me up. So yeah, Nominus, did you have an answer to, what you think, how Christians should be approaching Bitcoin?
Sure.
Who?
Sure. I love the idea of monastic Bitcoin mining. Like I said, I actually would probably do that. That just sounds like something I would do. But as a dual Catholic and Southern Baptist evangelist, I'm also interested in the capability of evangelizing with Bitcoin. So I think it was Matthew where Jesus basically says to use your worldly gain or use your worldly money to gain favor.
I think that's Luke 16.
Luke?
Yeah, it's called unrighteous wealth, I think.
Yes. Yes. You're correct. Yeah, it's Luke 16. That's correct. Exactly. I have it. And so, there are all these people and they're lost, man. They're chasing money. These are the people that need us the most. And in all my evangelization efforts in life, it's the people that need us the most that are the most likely to change, that are the most likely to accept this truth. It's the people, maybe they're not having a hard time in life. Maybe they have everything they need from Bitcoin investments 10 years ago, But maybe because of that, they're realizing a more difficult spiritual struggle than anyone else in the world, because of that success, I don't know. So I'm really interested in how do we proceed in a way that's going to be outreaching to these people, because not only does that accomplish the ultimate goal of Christ to save all of us, it also functions, as another secondary goal, which would be to provide basically networking capability to recursively expand out into the Web3 crypto technology network. And so I think there's no downside to having some type of evangelistic framework.
I think you should connect with Jordan, because that's really what Jordan's been doing a lot of. And we kind of had this question on the podcast when he came on the old crypto. So I had a podcast with Matt, I mentioned at the beginning, Crypto Conversion Podcast, and we had Jordan on, and we asked this question about whether Christians need to be using Bitcoin, or if it's really more that like Bitcoin needs Christians, right? So Jordan's been doing great work, I feel, evangelizing to the Bitcoin space, and I think it's highly needed.
Yeah, I'd love to chat, Jordan. I think, Connor, both of those, God always does this. He speaks in parallels. He'll say one thing, but it means three things, and they're all true at the same time. So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, so like it could very well be both of those things. Bitcoin needs to be used by Christians, and Christians need to extend into Bitcoin.
I wanted to kind of expand the question about decentralization to things beyond Bitcoin, but I kind of stacked the panel pretty heavy with Bitcoin, to be fair, so that was my fault. But
we blame you.
Yeah, it's my fault. It's 100%. It's always my fault.
The system,
but no, it's good. I think
the system is what it does. That's.
Well, listen, Jordan, I don't know anything about Bitcoin.
I think ARWeave
I just know the quote.
Big.
So.
I don't know. Well, anyway.
ARWeave is huge. I think. Well, this is my thing with
ARWeave.
So my problem with Super Bitcoin Maxis, to end the space on controversy, my issue with the Hyper Bitcoin Maxis is like, yes, I think Bitcoin is great. Yes, I think it lays the best claim to decentralized money beyond a shadow of doubt to me. But I also think that there's other things that can be benefited through decentralization. And I don't think the tech necessarily needs to be limited. Like, I don't think Bitcoin needs to have a monopoly on decentralization. And depending on what type of Bitcoin maxi we're gonna have maybe some different disagreements there. But I think decentralized storage is cool. I think ARWeave is doing some really cool stuff. But anyway, hey, that's unnecessary. I want to throw it to Matt to maybe close us out and answer that question that I posed to everybody about what should Christians be doing in the Bitcoin space right now. What should the church be doing to really to have a stake in the Bitcoin conversation?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think in general, I think Christians and I think the church should think about the future and how to and not be afraid of it and to participate in the development of the future. Obviously there are varying degrees, to various degrees at which you can understand and approach Bitcoin, right? And so I think, if you know how to write code, see if there's a way you can contribute, and try to add to that conversation. And I think Jordan is doing great work in trying to help churches adopt and religious organizations adopt Bitcoin, on their balance sheet, is one of the things, right, to retain their purchasing power. If you produce and consume goods and services, I think it would be great to, see to what extent you can build a resilient censorship resistant economy, and whether even if it's just with peers or with, in larger communities, to have circular Bitcoin economies, so that, whatever, in the event, so we're ready for, persecution if and when it happens. And so I don't know. I think everyone should just be educated and participate to the level, that you can participate.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. And I think I, and Super Testnet should connect about how we can help get some